Hey everyone, welcome to MorningSpace Lab. In this video, I will walk you through a very interesting project that is to set up a highly available load balancing service using HAProxy and Keepalived. Because this project is entirely based on Docker technology, that means you can play with it at your local by using a set of Docker containers, just like a sandbox. Before we dive into the details, let's take a quick look at the topology that we are going to use in this video. There are two instances of the web servers, my web 1 and my web 2. They are all based on Nginx and have both HTTP and HTTPS enabled. In front of the web servers, there are two instances of the load balancers, the master node, my LB1, and the backup node, my LB2. They have both installed HAProxy and Keepalived, and they share the same virtual IP that can be consumed by the client. Also, there will be health check at the Keepalived side to detect the healthiness of load balancer, and the health check at the HAProxy side to detect the healthiness of the web server. Okay, now let's take a look at how to run the Docker containers. First of all, you need Docker images. There are two images, one for web server, one for load balancer. You can build by yourself. Just git clone this project and run the docker build command against the two Docker files at your local. Or you can directly pull them from Docker Hub, just like this. So this is for the load balancer. Okay, it's done. Then the web server. Okay, we are done. Then let's go to start the containers one by one. You just need to copy and paste the Docker run commands here. One thing to note, before you start the containers, make sure you have created the virtual network called lab, because all the containers will work together in this virtual network. If it's not there, just copy and paste this command to create the network. Okay, now let's start the two web servers first. So this is for my web 1. And this is for my web 2. Now we can verify the web server by checking its health check endpoint in web browser. This is for my web 1, and this is for my web 2, and these two are the HTTPS version of the health check endpoint. Let's try the HTTP version for my web 1. Now we see the greeting message sent from my web 1, which means my web 1 is working quite well. And how about the HTTPS version for my web 2? Again, we see the greeting message from my web 2, which means my Web 2 is also working quite well. Now let's start the two load balancers and my LB1 first. It brings us into the container and the HAProxy service has not been started yet. Let's go to the directory /etc/HAProxy. There are a few sample configuration files. Just pick up one of them and copy as HAProxy.cfg. We can start the service. After it's started, you can tell the HAProxy log file to monitor its log. Or, another way to monitor HAProxy is to use its statistics report. Because all the sample configuration files have already enabled this feature, the only thing that you need to do is just copy the URLs here, then open it in web browser. As we have two load balancers, there are two URLs. Just take my LB2 for example. Input the predefined username, HAProxy, and the password PASSW0RD. Then, you will see all the overall status of the current HAProxy that is running. Since my LB1 is up and running, now let's go to LB2 and repeat the same steps. Okay, now both my LB1 and my LB2 are up and running, and we can go to the next topic that is about Keepalived. Before that, just one more thing to note. If you exit the container of the load balancer for some reason, the container will be stopped as expected. To go back to the container, you can run the below command. Let's try it in our terminal window. So now I'm in my LB1 container. After I type exit, it will go back to my host machine. Now I use this command to go back into my LB1 container. Okay, here we are. The HAProxy will not be started up by default, so you need to start it again. Okay, we are done. Now let's take a look at Keepalived. Although Keepalived has been installed in the load balancer container, we still need to modify its configuration before start. Now let's go back to my LB1 container and go to the directory /etc/keepalived. There are two sample configuration files. One is for master node and the other one is for backup node. As we are now in my LB1 and this is supposed to be the master node, let's open the Keepalived configuration file for master node. In this configuration file, there is only one thing we need to fill in. That is the virtual IP address. We need to define the virtual IP address that will be shared by both master node and backup node. And in order to make sure the shared IP address does not conflict with the IP addresses of all the other existing containers that are being involved in this virtual network, we need to know all the IP addresses that are being used. This can be done by running docker inspect command. We can go back to the README file on Git repository and copy the command. Then, in a new terminal window, run the command in your host machine. Okay, here we can see all the containers and their IP addresses. Now, I'm gonna use 172.23.0.6 as the virtual IP address. Let's go back to my LB1 and modify the configuration file. Because we have two load balancer services. Now, let's go back to my LB2 and do the same configuration change. This time, we will use the keepalived-backup.conf because that's the backup node. Okay, as we have finished the configuration, let's go to start the Keepalived on both nodes. Again, let's go to the README file and copy the command. There are two commands. One is for master node, the other one is for backup node. The only difference is they pick up different configuration file. Let's go to master node first. Then the backup node. Okay, now the Keepalived has been started on both nodes. In order to monitor its status, we can use tail command to check its log. This is for the master node, my LB1. When we see this line, entering master state, that means the Keepalived on master node has entered into the master state successfully. Now let's go to see the backup node. Here we can see entering backup state, which means the backup node has entered into the backup state successfully. Another thing that we could do is to run IP address command to check network interface information and see which node the virtual IP has been bound to. Let's go back to the README file and copy the command. On master node, we can see this is exactly the virtual IP address that we set up just now. And on backup node, we didn't see that's appeared in the network interface information. That means this node is still in backup state. When the master node is unavailable, the virtual IP will be bound to the backup node. We'll see this later. Now, let's try to run curl in either of the two load balancer containers. Send a request to the health check endpoint that is exposed from the virtual IP and see if it returns the greeting message from the web servers. This is the HTTP version of the health check endpoint, and this is the one that SSL is enabled. The signed certificate and the private key have already been put into the directory /etc/SSL when we build the doc image. Let's try this one. So this is my LB1, the master node. Replace the virtual IP placeholder with the actual value that we set up just now. Perfect. We see the greeting message from the web server, my web2, and now it's exposed from the virtual IP. Okay, so far we have done all the configuration for HAProxy and Keepalived. Now let's do a few more testing. First, let's try to stop one of the web servers, for example, my web1. This can be done by running docker stop in host machine. Okay, now it's stopped. Then let's check the HAProxy statistic report and see if my web1 is down. Great! We see my web1 is in red. That is as expected. We can also try the curl command as we did just now and see whether my web 1 will still be hit. Just as expected, we can see the greeting message is always coming from my web 2 now. Now let's start my web 1 again. Then, let's check the HAProxy statistics report again and see if my web 1 is up and running now. Great! Now we can see my web 1 is in green. Let's try to run the curl command again and see this time whether my web 1 will be hit. Great! Now we can see the greeting message could be coming from either my web 1 or my web 2. Now, let's try to stop the HAProxy on the master node, that is my LB1. Then, check the Keepalived logs on both two nodes. On master node, we can see my LB1 has entered into backup state. And on backup node, we can see my LB2 now has transitioned to master state. If we check the IP address command at the moment, we can see now the virtual IP address has been bound to my LB2, not my LB1. Run the curl command, it should still be working. This is because the backup node, my LB2, has taken the master role after the HAProxy service on my LB1 was stopped. Now, let's start the HAProxy service on my LB1 again. Then, check the Keepalived log on my LB1. Okay, we can see that it's entering master state again. And on my LB2, we can see that it's getting back to the backup state. This means my LB1 has taken back the master role since the HAProxy service on my LB1 has been recovered. Let's run IP address command again. And this time, we can see that the virtual IP address has been bound to MyLB1 again. And if we run the curl command now, it should still be working. Okay, that's all for this video. For more information, please check this README file and the GitHub repository. Thanks for watching and hope you like it. This is MorningSpace Lab. See you next time.